Yes, the minute I get the sign, the volume went up. It's like, ooh, okay. Hello, everybody, and welcome to my discussion on the first 5 features to check out in a new client's org. My name is Kathy Waterworth, or Kathleen Waterworth. You'll see my name in the ecosystem in both versions, but I'm from Toronto, Ontario, Canada, and after a few years of watching my husband in the ecosystem and attending the odd Dreamforce without understanding this, I actually started learning on Trailhead, and a few years later decided to make a career out of it. So now I am a virtual system administrator for an ISV partner based in the US, working with providing system admin support for various nonprofits around the US. I also have founded and am the group leader for Salesforce Saturday locally, and I started the first architect user group in Canada. And just recently completed my first cohort as a Rad Women Level 1 course. And this week I made it to the 17 times certified. Yes. Thank you. I don't advise scheduling an exam when you're trying to pack, because it made it particularly stressful, but I did it, and it's great. And the fun fact that London in our house is a very confusing term, because both my kids went to school in London, Ontario, and my son's current girlfriend is in school in London too, and my husband's going, yeah, your son's going to London this week, and I'm going, what? Oh, right, London, Ontario. So anyways, I'd like to start off by thanking all the sponsors and the volunteers who have put on this great event. They can't do it, the volunteers can't do it without the sponsors, and we can't have it without the volunteers, so just would like to express my gratitude for all of them. This is my first time at London's Calling, and so far, I know we're at the end of the day, but I think it's been a great event, and I hope you have too. So just to start off, there are no right answers. And you're like going, what? Okay, no. I have my ideas, and I'm sure everybody else does too, because I asked a bunch of people what their thoughts were on 5 things that you'd like to look at, and every single person came back with a different answer. I even went as far as asking ChatGPT a few times, and every time came back with a different answer. And if I said, well, what if you're an administrator and not a consultant? Oh, yep, totally different answer too. So, but that's okay. We'll still get you started here. But you can see here just some of the responses. I decided to throw it into a word cloud. And of course I had to use a cloud. It is Salesforce. Sorry, it's not blue. I should have made it blue. But yeah, there's a lot of different ideas in there. So let's get started. Let's change the page. Alrighty. So first things first, if you're going into a new org, whether I sort of am coming this from my virtual system admin, or some people call it managed services. But even as a consultant, these are kind of things to look into. First, find out about the company. What kind of clouds do they use? Are they using Sales Cloud? Are they using Service Cloud? If they're a nonprofit, which I work with a lot, do they actually have NPSP? Because that can be a totally different way of approaching things. If they don't have certain NPSP aspects, suddenly you're like going, you should do, oh wait, you can't, you don't have NPSP, under your breath, of course. Check out their licenses. Are they using all their licenses? Do they have a whole bunch that aren't being used and they're paying for? Or are they like maxing out on their licenses or sharing them? Nobody does that. No, not at all. Storage, are they maxing out on their storage, or do they have lots of room? Because that's always a thing to keep an eye out for. And expiry dates. And yes, that could be an issue, and you think, oh yes, of course they know when their expiry dates are. Panic call. We're locked out of our org. Well, why? Well, we didn't renew our license. Oh, well, yeah, you need to do that. Even as a nonprofit, you need to do that. So yeah, make sure they know what their expiry dates are, or at least you do, because somebody needs to keep track of that. Then we get into the users. And as a nonprofit, this sometimes gets a little fun, but look at the number of their active users that they have. And how many of, okay, here's a question first before I go into this. How many people have gone into an org and everybody's a system admin? Oh, come on, only, oh, no, yeah, okay, that seems more like it, yeah. So yes, do check out how many people are admins, how many should be. And if everybody's one, I think there's a discussion that needs to be had. Or you might want to check. There may have been somebody savvy enough to put the title of system admin in, but it's actually a clone profile that doesn't have as many people think they have the system admin profile, but they really don't have all the permissions. Sneaky, but I mean, and then going with the new system of minimum access profiles and using permission sets. This may become a moot point in a few years, hopefully, but we'll see how that works. Also check if they're logging in. I have been in orgs, people haven't logged in over a year. Why do they have a license? Has anybody else ever seen that? Or you know, are people having trouble logging in? Do they need their passwords reset? And I've seen a lot of orgs where they get very anxious about putting in the role hierarchy. Or in some ways, sometimes everybody's a CEO, which is always interesting. But is it a big deal? Are they actually using role, do they have role hierarchy set up? Because if they don't have it set up, probably not a big deal. But if they do, not everybody can be CEO, because that is just confusing. So, and from there, you know, role hierarchies and what you can see, let's get into the org-wide defaults. Is everything set up as read and write? Should they be? I mean, the idea is you should go with the principle of least access. So make sure that all the objects are set up properly. And then sort of referring back to the profiles, if you look at the profile settings, how many profiles do they have? How many custom profiles do they have? How many people are assigned to these profiles? Do you have a lot of people, a lot of profiles that there's only one person? Well, maybe take a look at those, and maybe they're a candidate to be one of the first ones that you switch to the minimum access profile and new permission sets. Easy one, you know, low-hanging fruit, easy ones to start with. And then when you're on the permission sets, how are the permission sets set up? Are they working? Who are assigned to them? And do the users have the right access that they need to see what they need to work with? And then we can look at the apps. And I'm talking more of the installed packages. So how many are installed? I mean, you may know all the apps that are installed, but some of them you're like looking at, what is this app and what does it do? Find out what it does. Is anybody using them? Or is it an app that somebody installed because they thought it was a good idea like not 20 years ago. Well, it could have been 20 years ago, but probably about 10 or so years ago, and nobody's used it since. Are the licensing, again, more licensing. Do they have expired licenses? If the licenses are expired, why is it there? And then finally, for R5 here, let's look at the objects. And this can get rather interesting. I mean, look at the custom objects that there are. How many do they have? Are some of these custom objects mimicking functionality of a standard object and thus causing some confusion. How do they interact with each other, like both the standard and the custom objects? And if they're part of a managed package, they could, have some restrictions on them. So that's a good thing to know ahead, because you think, oh yeah, sure, we can go and change that, realize it's part of a managed package, and then realize maybe not. But then again, there could be a bunch of custom objects that are sitting there, again, like the apps that got created a long time ago because somebody thought it was a good idea and have never been used or have no data in them. So you want to start cleaning those out if you do. And don't forget your standard objects too. I've been in orgs where accounts were named as programs. And it's like, sort of, because other people had ones that were called programs, it was like, why are your accounts programs? Well, somebody thought it was a good idea to call it that. Okay. But then I refer to everything as the API so I can keep it straight in my head, and they're like, it just causes confusion. And then when you get into nonprofits, a lot of nonprofits rename their opportunities as donations or gifts, or can't think of the third one, but you need to know this, because, and you talk opportunities, they talk something else. They may not know what is what. So how do we find all this information out? Well, obviously, you can just go through the org and look at all of this yourself. But there are some tools that are out there and that can help you. In fact, I've bumped into a few of the vendors who are upstairs that even have tools that help you put all of this into perspective. And it's like, I'm like going, I'll just take you and just bring you down for my demonstration. That will work. But some of the features that actually exist already in Salesforce are a good thing to look at. Health check is always a really good one to start with, especially from a security point of view. A lot of people don't worry about their logins or the login rules and all that kind of thing. So run the health check. It will tell you what is urgently needs to be fixed, and different levels. So it's always a good thing. And then everything on the right-hand side is just the path for you to get to these particular objects. Schema builder, I have a love-hate relationship with. I will admit it. I mean, if I could get schema builder to sort of get on a screen that is about this size, I'd probably be fine. I just find it very difficult to see it all in a very cramped space. However, the nice thing about Schema Builder is you can go in and find the particular objects that you want to compare and see how they relate to each other. So you can do that. So don't count Schema Builder out. It is very helpful. On top of course, using Object Manager. Salesforce Optimizer is another really good one to run. Some people have it set up already in their orgs to run monthly. If it isn't, probably should. It's because it's useful. It goes through profiles. It sort of checks what things are being used and not used. So it's always a good thing to go through, once a month if you can, just to check to see what is going on in the org. Setup audit trail. It took me a while to find this one, and honestly, it's probably my go-to every time is, this isn't working. And because as a VSA, I'm only in orgs 10 hours a month, so I'm not in there all the time. And there are other people who do things in the org and don't necessarily let me know. So the first thing I usually do is check up the setup audit trail to see what has happened, or if something worked and then an update came through from Salesforce or from a managed package, is maybe that's what's causing a sudden new issue that they didn't have. So, get used to taking a look at that. Unfortunately, you can only see about 20 or 30 rows of of the most recent changes, which means you need to download the last 6 months to see anything more of that. But the nice thing is it is ordered in the date from the most recent on down, so you could do that, or you could even sort it by user to find if one of the internal users changed something and you're like going, oh, that's what they did. And the next two are both, sort of external apps. Perm Comparator is one that I use that's based off the Heroku app when I don't want to necessarily install anything into a client's org. And then there's a User Access and Permission Assistant, which is an App Exchange app, that you can install. And both of those can allow you to compare both permission sets versus users versus profiles. So you can see if two people are supposed to have the same thing, or if you're trying to change them, how to match everybody up. So, okay. Now, as I said, there are a lot of things that you can take a look at in a new org. So I decided to throw in some extra honorable mentions, as we shall say. So definitely automations. I mean, that's a big thing. Flows and process builders and workflow rules and triggers. It's always good to get a good idea of what's going on in the org. And sandboxes. I've been in many of that. They have a sandbox that got refreshed about 5 years ago. And I'm going, do you ever use the sandbox to test anything? What's the sandbox? And you're like going, oh, okay. Let's refresh your sandbox and start new, and I'm going to teach you that this is where you try things out, not in your org. And then data quality. And yes, I interchange data and data. I'm Canadian, we speak every language of English. But you look at the quality, how complete is the data that is in the org? Do the contacts have all the information you need and accounts? How accurate is it? How reliable is it? Because if it's not reliable, it's not going to help anybody. You need to have reliable data to be able to function properly. So, come on, okay. So while you're doing all this, be sure to communicate with your users and stakeholders. The ones who use it from day to day know what's going on. They know what they like, or if they're not using it, they'll tell you what they don't like and what's wrong or what they're missing. And they can let you know what the challenges are that they have day to day. And, if you've ever heard, Salesforce is, has a lot of rabbit holes. Take a systematic approach, because you can very easily get distracted. You take one look at one other thing, and next thing you know, you're, 3 different pages down the road, and you're like going, what was I looking at in the beginning? So make it a systematic approach to find out what you're looking at. And if you can get your hand on documentation, especially if there was a previous consultant or someone who came in to implement something, try to understand what their customizations or the reasoning behind them, and hopefully then you could understand why, for on opportunities, somebody would create 4 flows, a process builder, and a trigger. And, oh, by the way, this process builder got created after they announced the end of life. Or all of these were created after they announced the end of life on process builders, and you're like going, why? Nobody can answer it. And I have since switched it to a flow. But, it would have been nice to see the documentation to at least understand why they did it, because the end user was like going, I don't know. That's what the consultant said to do. It's like, okay. And if you're on the other side, please create documentation that can be handed on so people can understand why you did things. Because when you're trying to do it at the back end and something's breaking, you're like going, I don't know. So just come on. There we go. Okay, let's get rid of my mouse. Okay, so just to recap, and I've added the recap, just some of the the path you need to take to get to them. Look at your company info. It's under setup. Users in their profile, obviously under users under setup. The security settings, you could look at both the sharing settings. That took me the longest time to remember that its sharing settings is org-wide defaults. Why didn't they just call it org-wide defaults? It would have been so much easier. Then looking at permission sets, which is under the users. And then for the apps, look under the installed packages. And then the data model. You can look at either Object Manager or a Schema Builder. And then again, the different extra tools that I mentioned earlier. So, apparently my mouth. That brings me to the end. If you would like, you feel free to connect with me. I hope all these bit.lys work. But my Salesforce Saturday and even my architect group are both mostly virtual, unfortunately. The Salesforce Saturday is Saturday morning, so people who live in the UK could possibly attend it. I won't ask you to attend my architect group because it's usually in the evening, which is usually after midnight for you, so don't feel you need to do that. And I'm also big, as a Canadian, I like to sort of bring Canadian content. I don't like to I can't bring maple syrup for everybody. I'm sorry, but I do like to bring chocolate bars that don't necessarily exist in the location I am. So I don't know if people saw it, I asked a question in the community of how do you like your coffee? And nobody got the right answer. But then again, I think you have to be Canadian to understand it. Because it's how do you like your coffee, and the idea is called crisp. So I have coffee crisps. I have about 18 of them, so if you're interested, you're welcome to come up afterwards to grab a few. And then I have one more chocolate. These have allergy alerts all over them because they have peanuts and may have been exposed to other nuts, so don't take these if you have an allergy. But these are called Crisp Crunches. And these were all, at one point, put out by Roundtrace. No, this one's always been Nestle, but this one's been Cadbury, and But they're Canadian, so if you're welcome to come up and have some. And apparently I still have 1 minute for question. Any questions? Yes, Yvonne. It all depends on how much leeway you have, if you can. I mean, there's some low-hanging things that you could probably change and nobody will know. Things like password, like the ones who are still using 5-character passwords. That obviously, depending on, again, if you're like me, I can't do anything without permission from the client. If you're in as a system admin, you would have a lot more leeway for making the changes and say, hey, listen, we need to update these, and talk to a executive stakeholder and say, this is what I've come up with. We really need to discuss the red ones. And then we need to discuss the yellow ones. The green ones, whatever, we'll talk about those later. But yeah, it's all a matter of you just sort of take it off one bite at a time and then just take care of it, because you don't want to leave your org vulnerable to outside security breaches on that. Any other question? Yeah.
I just wanted to comment on like the setup audit trail. It's always a good idea to do that first and export it, because it only lasts for 6 months. So the very first thing you do is you go on and you export it, and then you have it. Because then you're losing, as you go forward, you're losing that time. So
Yep.
I've often found that really valuable. And I guess for me, one of the other things that I've learned going into quite a few different orgs as well, and as you would know, none of them are perfect.
No.
They're all pretty rubbish under the hood, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. They all are pretty scary. Oh, and if you work in several different orgs, do yourself a favor when you download the setup audit trail and mention which org you downloaded it from. Because after a while, you're like going, which one was that? I mean, you can tell when you go in, because you obviously will see the domain and the email in the username. But I mean, it's a heck of a lot easier to see it before you go in there and figure it out, especially if like the first 30 things are all Salesforce, because they look the same with all of them. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, we're done. So thank you very much, and enjoy. Actually, and we're done, so enjoy the evening. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Anthony from DSelect. And what is DSelect as a platform? It is essentially a way to enable marketers that use the Salesforce Marketing Cloud to get more out of their data. DSelect serves both non-technical marketers, for instance those who do not know how to write SQL queries, as well as technical marketers who are very well versed in the platform but who are looking for ways to be more efficient, or who just want to enable their less technical colleagues. DSelect is an official Salesforce Marketing Cloud partner that offers the leading marketing data enablement platform on AppExchange. Fortune 500 leaders and mid-sized businesses leverage DSelect's intuitive solutions to help marketing teams create more powerful, segmented audiences, control marketing communication frequency, and achieve faster Marketing Cloud ROI without code or technical dependencies.